everybody. Welcome to Hopkins Half Hour. Just a wee bit of a panic getting organised here tonight, but we're with you. And we're going to take a look tonight at the McDougall Art Gallery and a look at the legendary Lee Miller photographs, 1929 to 1964. I haven't seen the exhibition, but I understand it is quite stunning, and I do intend to go along. To tell us more about Lee Miller and the exhibition, from the McDougall Art Gallery, I'd like to meet Neil Roberts. Neil, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
So, you've been running 1 week with this exhibition.
Yes.
What's been the interest rate so far?
The interest has been fantastic because we've had, on Sunday alone, we had 1,900 visitors. And that's very good for a visitation for the weekend for McDougall.
Sounds a lot, yeah.
It is indeed.
What would you call a break-even point? If you got how many, would you be happy?
Oh, well, we don't numbers crunch in a big way, but
Okay.
but if we get that sort of numbers on the weekends and consistently through the week, the numbers have been very good. We haven't had the tally for this week yet, but I'm sure that it's going to be up on the average one too.
Enough to make you smile.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Neil, I want to know more about Lee Miller, the legendary Lee
Yes.
Miller. The booklet that I have here, and I'll just hold this up. This is available for those who come along to see the display, is it?
It's available. Yes, that's
I
available.
don't know if we're on camera with
for
this one or
purchase.
not, but we are. This is a little booklet. As you can see, Lee Miller was a very attractive woman.
Indeed, yes. She started her life, in fact, even though she's a photographer, or she was a photographer, she started her life in front of the camera rather than behind it.
What has?
As a model, and that legendary is really the word for Lee Miller, because there's legend there. There's a bit of everything in her life. You name it. She seems to have been connected in some way with history, with all the sort of social things that one would sort of associate with one or two individuals, but certainly Lee Miller had it all rolled into one. She started off in New York. She was born in New York, and her father was an engineer, a professional man who had a passion for photography. And this is where, of course, she gained that interest at a very early age. She had a brother, Eric, who went on to also become an aviation photographer, a very successful one.
So, an early age. At what age did she start modelling?
Well, the modelling incident was the modelling was really an accident more than anything else. She was actually in a New York street, and Condé Nast, the publisher of Vogue magazine, dragged her off the roadway because she was about to be knocked down by a car, an oncoming motor vehicle. So he pulled her back, and he realised she had very good looks, and asked her whether she was interested in modelling for Vogue. And of course, from there she had several years in the late 20s as a model. And so it happened very much by accident.
She married, of course.
Yes, twice, and was legendary also for her her lovers as well, as very much as apart from her marriages. The first marriage was to Aziz Louis Bey, who was an Egyptian businessman. She married him in 1934.
Did she have family?
Eventually she had a son in 1946, son Anthony Penrose, as his name was born.
And
he's
Anthony
the only
Penrose,
son.
of course, is the author of this.
Yes, he's the author of
this little booklet, which
Yeah.
I think we can see if I hold it up a little bit higher and straight, you'll be able to see it. I would recommend to anybody who's going to go along to this exhibition to read this book first and get... The woman has such a fascinating background,
Yes.
and I think you need to know that and to read it.
I think so,
Don't
but the photographs are very good too. They have their own story to tell.
Each and every one.
Well, yes.
And we will, after the break a little shortly, we'll take a look at these photos, and Neil will be able to tell you exactly what is depicted in each and every one. So the background, why that particular
Yes.
one was taken, and
Yes.
so on. It'll give you a little preview anyway as to what's coming up. While we're talking about the art gallery, Neil, what's the next major attraction that you have coming up?
The next major one that we've got coming up is the Ria Bancroft exhibition, which is coming up in early May. And Ria Bancroft is a Canterbury artist. She died in 1993. But this is a sculpture exhibition. It's mostly Ria Bancroft sculpture really between 1960 and 1992. Ria Bancroft became quite involved in religious sculpture as well. She did many commissions for churches, and so it'll be a different sort of show. It'll be an interesting one, though, we hope.
And other major attractions that you know of for the coming, say, 12 months?
Well, coming up later in the year, we've got Reckoning with the Past, which is a show from China, contemporary Chinese art. And then we move on to, a little bit further on, we move to B.W. Mountford, who is, of course, a well-known historical figure in terms of architecture in Christchurch. And then later in the year, we have C.F. Goldie, of course, which is the Maori portrait show, which comes over the summer months.
One would presume that would be a huge success.
It will indeed, I think. Well, we hope so. But it will just give a contrast to the program, and it was very successful in Auckland. Goldie's always very popular with the public, so we'll wait and see.
Well, quite a bit to look forward to.
Yes. Yes.
Back to Lee Miller.
Yes.
This is a touring exhibition, isn't
yes.
it?
The show actually, strangely enough, the show actually began its touring way back in 1989. It did a European tour between 1989 and 1994, and then, of course, went into sort of recess for a while, and then was picked up by an Auckland promoter of exhibitions, Christopher Johnson, and he's brought it to New Zealand for an Australasian tour, and it comes through Christchurch on to Govett Brewster, then to Waikato, and I think there's one other venue in the North Island as well before it goes to Australia.
New Plymouth?
Govett Brewster at New Plymouth, yes.
Right. Yeah. I wonder, will this just keep on going?
Well, it's made up out of the Penrose, the Lee Miller Penrose archive
Collection,
and which is over 100,000 photographs.
Yes, it's a tremendous.
So
amount,
it's a tremendous amount of photography there, a resource, and that's administered by Lee Miller's son and a trust, so. One would hope that in years to come there will be other shows, but this is perhaps the first major show of her work. She did appear in group shows during her lifetime, but this is the first one which is of major significance for the...
We're very lucky to have it here, aren't we?
Yes, it's one of those fortunate exhibitions that we didn't know to begin with how it would turn out, but we were very pleasantly surprised now that it's come.
Neil, we'll take a look at some of the work in the exhibition and have you explain just what it's all about. And we'll do that right after this. Program tonight, looking at the legendary Lee Miller photographs, 1929 to 1964. The display is currently on show at the McDougall Art Gallery. As promised, we're going to now show you some of the photographs in that exhibition, and Neil Roberts has kindly agreed to give us a little running commentary on just what each and every one depicts. So there's the first of them, Neil.
Yes. Well, this one is a very interesting photograph. It's called the exploding hand, really, it shows a scratched window. And what's happened is that Lee Miller has actually photographed a person opening the door, and the scratch seems almost as if the hand is exploding. And on the screen at the moment is the very, very important work for Lee Miller, which is the portrait of Murray Oppenheimer, who was a surrealist artist. And the technique used there is solarization, which was one she actually was responsible for herself.
It's a slightly different colour toning, wasn't there?
Yes, there is, because it happened totally by accident. You know, she was actually, when she was working as an assistant for Man Ray, the surrealist artist photographer, she was developing the film in the darkroom, and a rat ran across her foot. She screamed, turned the light on, and of course exposed too early. And he rushed in to try and help her, and he actually also tried to throw it into the fixative. But in the interim process, you know, they created a new technique.
What a story.
Yes, quite amazing it was.
You can't keep a commentary running with all of these because they're going too fast for you, I realise, but odd ones that have some significance you might like to just pass a remark on.
Well, this is Charlie Chaplin, City Lights, and Lee Miller, of course, has put the chandelier on his head, and of course, in true surreal fashion, it's a real image of unreality, but that's the legendary Charles Chaplin with Lee Miller's depiction of City Lights, or Lights.
It's amazing.
And that's a photograph of Man Ray, really her mentor in a way in her earlier years, and she, of course, she started her photography in Paris with Man Ray, and he was quite an influence upon her. Others, of course, of friends. This photograph was taken in the 1930s, early 30s, when she had her own studio in 1932, 33 in New York, and other images like this one, which is a very unusual depiction of which was really a balcony with looking down, not the normal sort of way a photograph would be taken. It gives a totally different impression. It's the found object, you know, the sudden found object, the objet trouvé, and the image trouvé, which is, or the found image, which Lee Miller actually exploited a great deal. The sudden coming upon something that looked interesting.
What sort of comments are you getting from people who have been already?
Oh, very favourable, very favourable. People are enjoying the show. And, you know, this is just a simple shot of a head with manicured nails, and the emphasis could be on that, but there's perhaps a suggestion of something other than that. And this, of course, is a self-portrait, which she took in 1932, which is the one which is people will see most in promotional imagery on the artist and the exhibition.
Is that the same as on the cover of the book?
It is indeed, yes.
A very elegant looking woman.
Indeed. She was, you know, and we can see actually examples of the solarization, or that technique which she developed with Man Ray. Just in this image here, that dark outline, which throws the face into strong relief against the background. You know, almost becomes quite sculptural in a sense. And then, of course, there were just the simple still life subjects that she also used in her photography. And it's amazing to think that this was done in the early 30s without any inventive light effects that might be used today. You know,
all natural, as it was. What we're seeing is as it was.
And this, of course, is Gertrude Lawrence, the famed actress, and she was appearing on Broadway in the early 30s, and she was among a whole host of individuals that Lee Miller photographed at this time, or came through her studio. And this work, which is quite inventive in a sense, was thought to be the inspiration for Magritte, the surrealist artist. He did a painting called The Kiss, which showed a very similar background image to this. But it's, and here we have an image of again a performer. Picasso described her as giving birth to a camera, the way in which the photograph has got distorted. And there we have, of course, Picasso photographed in 1937. A group of surrealist artists, Lee Miller and Roland Penrose, were all staying at the same hotel at the time, and he actually painted her 2 or 3 times. This is from her time in Egypt, and of course she hasn't just painted the pyramid, but different image. This is from a series of works. This one, the cost of, the price of culture as a result of the war, and there's a whole series of photographs which she took in 1940 after the Blitz, and this is the so-called silent Remington, which was a typewriter prized by people in those times, but it couldn't be more silent than it is there. And here we have Cologne Cathedral, after the bombing, and it's almost like a forest with the masonry on the ground, like leaves after an autumn. And of course, this is the burning of Hitler's Berchtesgaden home. She got all the way through the war to Hitler's home, and of course also the camps, where we find here various members of or not members but prisoners after the war going through belongings to try and find something to trade, and then of course the desperate images of the Dachau.
She covered a lot of territory, didn't she?
Indeed, yes.
And a huge range of subjects.
Absolutely.
There was no limitation, really, was there?
No, not really.
What's this one here, Neil?
And here we have actually the horror of the ovens.
We're still on that.
We're actually in, and of course, some prisoners looking at the remains of some of their fellow prisoners, and here we have the perpetrators of the deed. Apparently, every time these 2 men were in a room and they were guards who were dressed in civilian clothes, and every time the door opened, they were pleading for their life. This could be Bosnia or Rwanda today. This photograph, is very, and in a sense, it's timeless in that way, because it proves to some extent that nothing's changed much. This is a photograph of after the war celebration. The lights all came on, and the moving of a fairground in Britain. And this is a nighttime shot with the fairground. Two surrealist artists here, shown together with their hands against the window pane. Just a shot that she took in the late 1940s. And here we have Max Ernst against the horizon, and Paul Eulard, another surrealist.
Is that a little girl?
No, that is his wife. And Lee Miller felt oppressed a little bit like with the statue of Roland Penrose, who became a very, very much celebrated British artist, and she felt a little bit in that.
He does look like a giant. Well, that's the last the last of what we have on film there. Neil, thank you very much for taking the time to come in and explain some of those photographs. So I hope our viewers enjoyed your commentary. I'm sure they will have. It'll add a little more meaning when they go along to see the exhibition. When does it close?
It closes in the second week of April.
Oh, so there's a bit of time yet then.
Oh yes,
yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Neil.
Very good. Thank you.
Neil Roberts from the McDougall Art Gallery. We'll be back.
The fuel.
Are the onboard videos